Hi, everybody. Welcome back to what is our fifth installment of Ballpark Figures. I am your host, Shakeia Taylor. For those of you who may not know me, I am a baseball writer. I've won a couple of awards, one you may have heard of. And tonight's guest is Todd Radom. Todd is an independent graphic designer who has created logos for professional sports franchises and events for the past 2 decades. His work includes the official logos for the Super Bowl and 2009 NBA All-Star Game, the graphic identities for the Washington Nationals and Los Angeles Angels, and the SABR 49 and SABR 50 convention logos. If you have not yet registered for SABR 50, you can still do that. It's this summer. He is the author of Winning Ugly, a visual history of the most bizarre baseball uniforms ever worn, and most recently, Fabric of the Game on the NHL's team names, logos, and uniforms. Todd, are you there?
You figure after 3 years, we'd know what to do, you know?
No, I feel like someone is always on mute, right? We need one of those mugs, you're on mute, just to remind people.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be with you and see some familiar names out there. And what a great evening. So can't wait to chop it up.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you. We talked a little bit on the phone before, and by a little bit, I mean for like ever, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm a big fan of jerseys and hats, and I'm actually wearing one of your shirts tonight.
I couldn't do it.
Yes,
I didn't want to be matchy-matchy.
I feel like you should have worn it. I think everyone would have loved for us to be twins, right? Like,
We
it's
could
a
have a
good looking
wardrobe
shirt.
change in between. I don't know.
So I'm gonna get to first the beginnings of your career. Tell us how you got started.
Yeah, wow. So I always say that it's in the DNA because I come from a family of artists. I am a fourth generation working artist. My dad was kind of a creative, what I would call a creative jacket of all trades. At various times, a photographer, a copywriter, a designer, art direction. His father, my grandfather, was a fine artist and an illustrator who took me to museums when I was a kid. So I kind of soaked it all up. My grandmother was a visual artist. I have a brother who is a photographer and a photo retoucher. I have a cousin who's a jazz drummer. I've got a niece who's a designer. Blah, 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 blah. So anyway, it's all in the DNA. And I was always one of these kids that was not necessarily a good or great athlete, but because of my DNA, always interested in sports, but I looked at sports through what I call a little bit of a different lens.
Mm-hmm. You found a creative way to get into sports without having to like work out, basically, is what it sounds like. I really respect that.
Yeah. And actually, so I think that I always say, like, within every visual artist, there's this primal urge where we draw, we doodle. And I brought a prop with me aside from the shirt that I just had. When I was a kid, I would go to games. Here's a Yankees program from 1978, and I would keep score and I would doodle. And when you look at these logos, my work all these years later, 40 some odd years later, has appeared on the uniforms of all of those teams. And I've replaced a couple of those logos entirely. So I always feel like I was born to do this.
Oh, that's amazing. Also, I love the logos on the bottom of your score sheet. I'm a doodler too, but clearly not as good at it as you are. Do you have a favorite project? Is there something that you worked on that you're like, yes, I love this. This was amazing.
Wow, it's I always liken this to asking which is your favorite child, kind of a thing. I would say this, that over all of these years, these many decades, a couple stand out. And again, here we are, aficionados of baseball history. So a couple that really rise to the fore that maybe, I don't know, aren't the most prominent ones. I did the 50th anniversary logo for the commemoration of Jackie Robinson's historic debut. This was in 1997. It was worn on the uniforms of all major league clubs. And I got to collaborate on the 75th logo just now. So a big span of a career. I did all the art for MLB's All-Century team back in 1999, which was such a cool, immersive project, a series of 100 illustrations of the 100 greatest players, the logo for the project. All these things were all over Fenway Park during the All-Star game that year, also at the World Series in Atlanta when the team was announced. And then, you've got projects like I did the Los Angeles Angels back in 2001. Now, listen, I always joke that this look made its debut in 2002. Angels go to their first World Series and only one in their history. They win the World Series. I still am waiting for my ring. But anyway, that's a little bit of a different one that has stood the test of time. Did the Washington Nationals when the Expos moved to DC in 2004, going into 2005, and a little bit of a sleeper one that I get called upon to talk about sometimes. I did the identity for the Brooklyn Cyclones, minor league club. I'm a New York guy. I love history like you love history. So these things in this case also converge, and all these years later, you're still using it. And I see that logo, it holds up. It makes me happy.
That's a good one, by the way. So since we're talking team and brand identity, I got to talk about my home team, the Cleveland Guardians. What do you think about the new look of that team?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. And you and I talked about this a little bit on the phone. So it is a very unusual situation there, to say the least, for many, many reasons that we probably don't have to expand upon. But team rebrands happen all the time. All of us know this. That is one type of situation. Another situation which doesn't happen as frequently would be a club moving. And again, Nationals being the case in point. The first one since 1971 in that case. Renaming a team is really unusual. I mean, the Colt 45s became the Astros in 1965. This was a very, very different world. Licensing really didn't exist. The internet didn't exist. All of these considerations didn't exist. So Cleveland goes out there and this logo appears, poof, out of the blue last summer. It comes out that the club is going to rename themselves as Guardians, which I like the name very much. I think it's aspirational. I feel like there is some local connection there. And the identity gets out at the same time. And without knowing anything about the project, without having had any involvement in it whatsoever, I looked at it and I said, wow, this is a really strange thing that just happened, because our visual identities in sports start with a primary logo. They then spin off into these secondary logos, this very kind of robust suite of assets. And I felt like there wasn't a lot of meat on the bones. Now, part of that, that goes beyond likes and dislikes. Think about like brand architecture. Listen, we're all getting used to the name still. I've read about swear tip jars of, people having to throw a quarter in there on air when they mention Guardian, old names instead of Guardians. I think the identity is taking a little time to get used to. Seeing it on these players as opposed to existing in a vacuum is a very different thing as well. I hope they can build onto it and live with it for a while.
I mean, as a fan of the team, I kind of have to live with it, but I wasn't too fond of sticking to red and blue, right? I feel like red and blue are really overused in sports. So if you could, what color would you do? Like just some bizarre jersey flop, what would you do? And what team would you do it for? Like what kind of, and there's like a fun alternate that's not a City Connect. We'll talk about the City Connects in a minute, but like what colors would you incorporate?
Yeah, well, colors in the best of instances are directly associated with their cities, right? So let's put aside Cleveland for just 1 minute. When the Florida Marlins, now the Miami Marlins, launched in 1993 as an expansion club. They had a blank canvas, literally a blank canvas. And at this point in time, there were a lot of expressive sports identities and some new colors coming on the scenes. So when the Marlins launched, it seemed very appropriate, given where they played, to go out there with something that was primarily aqua, right? So
Yeah.
the Marlins step away from aqua a little bit. They win the 2003 World Series, their second World Series win in 6 years, wearing black, looking very black, right? Trends kind of come and go with colors. Pittsburgh, the official colors of the city of Pittsburgh are black and gold. Therefore, it makes sense that the Pirates, the Steelers, and the Pittsburgh Penguins all wear black and gold. So let's step back and look at Cleveland. What is the look of Cleveland in terms of colors? What makes sense for this? I will say, and we'll talk about City Connect, as you said, momentarily, but the Rockies were another one of those franchises. Came in with the Marlins, Purple Mountains Majesty, made all the sense in the world. What is the look of Cleveland? Cleveland is a traditional, you tell me, because you're from there and I'm not. I've been there a million times in my life, but it is, it's not the Rust Belt city that it was at one point in time. Are there colors that embody Cleveland and the surrounding areas? I'm not sure there are.
I don't think so. And the Cavs, I like the old school blue and orange Cavs situation. I thought that was incredible. And now they've gone more into like the wine and gold, and then the Browns and the orange and brown. I'm not a fan of orange and brown as a combination or independently. It just gives me kind of a poo feeling. So I don't know that Cleveland has an identifying color. I know everyone would probably bring up fire, right? They would bring up that.
Yeah, but we don't want to talk that, like, that is old Cleveland.
Yes, and I don't know that New Cleveland has an identity.
Yeah, and I think that, it's so interesting because everybody that I spoke to from Cleveland in anticipation of this identity change was saying, whatever you do, don't do rock and roll, right?
Agree.
It is not. It is not. It's done to death. It is not what 21st century and beyond Cleveland is all about. It's interesting, a name like this is a decision that is made once, presumably every 100+ years. Colors come and go. You mentioned the Cleveland Cavaliers today. They come out with a refreshed brand identity that centers around wine and gold, which is, to me, very ownable. I kind of love the wine color. They go with a gold now. They'll go to something else in a couple of years. This is very symptomatic of our diminished attention spans. But clearly the Cleveland Guardians wanted to go out there with something that was familiar in terms of the name itself, the end of the name as opposed to the end of the old name. And they clearly wanted to bring fans who are less than enamored of this name change along by the hand and say, we're going to walk forward into this new era and not leave people behind too far.
That's a good way to look at it. I definitely did consider that because I was like, just change it all. Do it all. Get rid of everything. Right. Like, I feel like if you're going to do it, let's do it. So the City Connect jerseys, I have strong feelings. I'm sure some of the people watching have strong feelings. What are your thoughts? Do you have a favorite? Can you rank them? Just the ones that are out so far.
Yeah, so I'm a Boston Red Sox fan, and I'm, like everybody on the internet, as we have talked about just very recently, hate my Red Sox going out there looking like minions or UCLA or something there is no connection. If I were involved, and we hate this stuff because people like me just get eviscerated on social media. Well, I decided to do this. None of these decisions take place in a vacuum. I'm going to leave the Red Sox behind because I think you can tell how I feel about it. The most recent one that we just talked about, the Colorado Rockies, I kind of love. And I'll tell you why. I think that there is a very deep connection to the area. I see that. I understand that it's Colorado license plates. It's not a reach. There's no barrier to entry for me. There's also a lot of green at Coors Field. Green was originally kind of a unofficial tertiary color for that ball club, along with the black and purple and silver. So it works. And I just like it. It's refreshing, and it doesn't seem like it's coming out of absolute nowhere. A couple of others, and I'm going to riff, and we'll chop it up because I want to hear your feelings about it too. I know you and I talked about in Chicago, the Cubs go out there with Wrigleyville.
Yes,
What did you
it's
say
not a
to
real
me
place.
last time we spoke?
It's not a real place.
Not a real
And
place, an imagined neighborhood, but a sense of, a state of mind, perhaps,
I mean,
like Margaritaville.
yeah, but I feel like the Wrigleyville vibe is, it's now very corporate. And those jerseys definitely scream boring corporate blue on blue type thing to me personally. I'm not a fan of it. I do have to
I'm
live
there
here
with
and
you.
see it
I
every
think
day.
they are very, it's like, a very safe, big heaping bowl of mashed potatoes, as I sometimes say. Nobody's going to get excited about it, but maybe it tastes pretty good. The White Sox, I kind of like because they look like the White Sox. They spin off of the Old English identity, which for fans of my generation, it's kind of stunning that the White Sox have looked like the White Sox for as long as they have, because they had a ton of visual changes in the 60s and 70s and 80s. A couple of other highlights of the City Connect uniforms. I kind of like the Marlins. It's a little caliente, which obviously is what that's all about. I
Yeah.
kind of love the Nationals.
Do you?
I do. It's a little something different,
Okay.
And then there are the ones that, like, whatever. Giants. I always talk about form and function have to come together with this stuff, and the lack of visibility of the numbers on the back of the Giants orange jerseys make me scratch my head a little bit. But but here you go. These uniforms are getting people to talk about this stuff a little bit more, and that's not a bad thing.
So let's talk about winning ugly for a second. So what makes a jersey or a uniform bizarre? Like, what makes it just wild?
Yeah. Shakeia, I always say that, like, I used to have a bulldog, and I
Okay.
would walk this dog down the street, and I cannot tell you how many people said to me, what's your dog's name? It was Casey, actually. And they would look at this dog and say, she's so ugly, she's beautiful. So ugly is in the eye of the beholder. Bizarre is in the eye of the beholder. Winning ugly, which is directly behind me over here, conveniently placed, is what I call my loving homage to some of the most questionable uniforms in Major League Baseball history. And it really starts from, my generation. I grew up in the 70s. It was a time of great experiment visually in not only MLB, but across all sports. And there were new leagues, the ABA and the WHA in basketball and hockey, respectively, even the WFL, the World Football League. And it was a time when people were dressing in perhaps questionable styles, and this bled into our sports, right? So sports is kind of a microcosm of our society. So anyway, I started with that and rolled forward. The genesis of the book started with a New York Times op-ed that I wrote in the spring of 2017. And it was looking at ugly uniforms and as kind of, a nostalgic, wistful look at the weird time that I grew up.
So let's say there's someone young watching, maybe. How would someone get into what you're doing? Like, what's the path to that? How would someone who's interested get a job doing that? It's so cool.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I always say that, like, when I started doing sports design, and this was back in the very early 90s, so it's 30 years ago, I come from this generation that learned this craft by hand before computerization, when it was very much an arts and crafts kind of thing. Pen and ink, cutting, pasting, noxious fumes and cement and photography and all this stuff. A very different world. I feel like I was born at the right time because these interests and this knowledge and this, subject matter sort of converged in this wonderful way. Today, I think younger people, there's almost a paradox to me in the sense that on the one hand, it is really, I don't think it's easy to get noticed, but if you do great work and you are passionate and knowledgeable in the way that, I feel I was all those years ago, you're going to get noticed. There are so many ways to get noticed. You put your stuff out there on social media, the right person finds it, you just never know. On the other hand, it's like finding a grain of sand on a beach. There are a
Mhm.
lot of really talented people. So the pathway, as far as I'm concerned, and I get asked this question quite frequently, as you can imagine, a couple of things, certainly hone your craft, but study up on the business and how this stuff is activated and deployed. Because clearly logos and uniform lettering get blown out and utilized in such a vast variety of ways. Things need to be kind of structurally sound in a way that they weren't all those years ago because of the fact that we look at our phones and these things are tiny, they are avatars. And on the other hand, they get blown up to the size of stadiums and arenas and buildings. I would say, like I said, so know your craft, know the business. It's got to start with an internship. Hopefully it's a paid one, perhaps at a college. Volunteer your logo, flex your logo muscles if that's what you're interested in, and volunteer for a local little league or a church or a youth group or something like that. There are opportunities that are out there that you can build upon. And, it's going to take a little while, but that's probably the place to start.
What kind of research do you have to do, like about a city or a team to kind of create this? Because I feel like a logo is part of an experience, right? It's a part of the whole thing. What do you have to do to get to the finished product?
Well, hey, I'm a SABR member, so I love research, right? You know exactly what I'm
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah.
I always say that every job starts with research. So I will, hunker down, bury myself, and learn. Maybe I have preconceived notions of fan bases, of stadiums. I've seen games in something like 55 different stadiums and MLB ballparks, right?
Mhm.
I need to throw some of that out the window. And let's say it's Cleveland. My memories of sitting there at Old Municipal Stadium, of being at the 95 World Series at Jacobs Field, throw those out because whatever we're working on is usually about the future, unless it's commemorating
Mhm.
a past event. So that research begins with just looking at visual inspiration, looking at the visual history of a particular club, going beyond the logos and uniforms, thinking about significant historic events, thinking about perhaps where this particular place is going, if you can find out such a thing, and then starting to lay this stuff out in what we call mood boards, which are, digital files that are, I'll usually assemble a PDF consisting of a bunch of images for inspiration. And I want to put this stuff out there before we dive into a project in order that we have some idea of a solid foundation to spring forth from. And then the fun starts.
That sounds intriguing, honestly. I've always wanted my own personal logo. I don't know what it would look like. I've had friends attempt to draw me different things, and they're always hysterical. Like everyone always just draws my hair. Like that is apparently my defining
You
characteristic:
got
my
a
glasses and my
trademark,
hair.
yeah, trademark attribute.
So I found the story of how you collaborated with another person. I'll let you tell it for this year's Jackie Robinson Day, the 75-year anniversary. I thought that was so cool. Can you tell everyone else about it? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm at the point in my life where I have attained Todd father status because because I'm the age that I am and I've been around the block and I try to be a good mentor, a good member of our community, especially we're in a world where, as we've talked about, people have hot takes. So about you know 8, 9, 10 years ago, it's all a blur. I was approached at a design conference by a young woman named Britt Davis. Britt Davis is an African American woman, originally from Charlotte, North Carolina. And she approached me and a couple of peers and, talked about getting into sports design in a big way. And I saw something here that I really, that stood out in a couple of ways. First of all, I will happily say that my industry has gotten more diverse in every conceivable way since I started all those years ago. All those years ago, it was me and about 5 white guys, right? We could have had a conference at and that was it. It's far, far more diverse. But in Britt Davis, I saw somebody who was intellectually curious, insanely talented, and wanted to be a great sports designer. And she asked me to be her thesis advisor when she was studying for her Master's of Fine Arts degree at Savannah College of Art and Design. So I served as her thesis advisor, and we're very, very, very close friends. And anyway, the opportunity arose to collaborate with her, as you referenced, for the official MLB logo for the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson's historic debut. And this was such a cool project because the nature of the collaboration, she is located in Atlanta, I'm in the New York area. So literally every night for a stretch of time, we were just kind of like the best thing, about collaborating creatively is that chopping it up, sending stuff back, forth. What if we did this? What if we did this? What if we did? And anyway, the long story short, the concept of she and I, two very disparate people, age-wise, all of it, I kind of feel like it's something that Jackie Robinson would have approved of. And we're very proud of the results. And we're collaborating on something else as we speak, which is really cool.
Oh, that's cool. Is it something MLB related or completely different?
Can't talk about it. The cone of silence. Yeah.
Fine. Then we will all sit and wait until we can spend our money on whatever it is.
There you go.
I'll get to some of the questions in the chat because people have been chatting this whole time, which is always super cool to me. I'm gonna try to get to the top. Which non-sports artists have inspired you growing up? Any contemporary artists?
Wow. So I'm a designer. I went to School of Visual Arts in New York City, and the great graphic designer Milton Glaser, who everybody knows his work because he created the I Heart NY logo, right? I mean, talk about iconic, but he was a great influence. He passed away last year at the age of 90. I was very lucky to have known him personally a little bit and have interacted with him over the years. I mean, there are, painters, fine artists, illustrators, a host of people. He's the first name that comes to mind in terms of being influential. I have to say, like, there are sports designers that I didn't know too much about growing up that I've gotten to know. I've gotten to know a man named Richard Walker, who's responsible for one of my favorite logos of all time, the Toronto Blue Jays original logo from 1977. I'm going to be going to a Blue Jays game with him in a couple of weeks, so I can't wait.
Oh, that sounds real cool. You'll have to report back on that one because I really love the Blue Jays logo history. Will the Yankees tarnish their hallowed pinstripes by letting a corporate logo appear on the jersey sleeve?
We all have to unbunch with this stuff because this is the world in which we live. The Yankees hold themselves above all others when it comes to so many things, including the sanctity of their uniforms. I'm kind of making fun a little bit because, as I said earlier, I'm a Red Sox fan. But I always feel like, listen, you put a logo next to another logo, and they tend to diminish one another to whatever extent in our consciousness. We can't imagine, today is Lou Gehrig Day, we can't imagine Lou Gehrig with a Nike swoosh on his uniform. But times change. We are bombarded by brand imagery, I always say, 24/7, 365. I'm not necessarily happy about the coming, of advertising on MLB uniforms. I'm really not. But this is the reality of things. And I think, the Yankees aren't a whole lot different than the Dodgers or the Cardinals or the Giants in that respect. Classics looks that have been around in some instances for a century or more. It's going to take some getting used to.
What logos catch your eye more personally, simple or more complex?
Definitely simple for a couple of reasons. Simple is hard from this is musically, artistically, architecturally. Think about that Nike swoosh. Love it or hate it, it is instantly recognizable. All it is this. There's no lettering attached to it. Think of the Apple logo. Think about that Yankees NY, things like that. Simple is hard, and simple, the imperative right now, considering where this stuff is activated, simple is back. It went away for a while, but it is back. And think about all of our teams who are devolving their looks in many, many ways. The Pittsburgh Pirates, for instance, who used to have that laughing, pirate guy with the bandana, the scout, that guy. It's now just a simple P. The Padres logo, their primary mark is just an SD. Simple is back.
Well, Meredith is asking, is there a design on the underside of the brim of your hat?
How about that?
Oh, good eye, Meredith. I didn't even notice that. And I've been staring at him this whole time.
Meredith would know that. Master knitter, baseball investigator extraordinaire.
Most MLB logos are in circles. Does this limit your creativity?
No, not really. I mean, circles are a great way to deliver a lot of information in an elegant space. If we think about proportions, we typically don't want logos that are too tall or too wide. So confining something in a circle makes sense. Circle is, in the case of baseball, the shape of the ball. It is instantly recognizable. Here too, no barriers to entry. It can get a little bit boring at times, but listen, I'm working on a logo right now that has a lot of wording. The only way to convey all of this verbiage is to incorporate it in that arc. Sometimes it's as simple as that.
When the Angels went red, it was reported that was Gene Autry's favorite color. If so, how come they didn't don red when they came in as an expansion club?
It was Gene Autry's favorite color. That is an absolute fact. And the fact also back then was that, as I said earlier, there really was very little in the way of licensing or national TV or instances where people thought about what the identity of a team was going to be. I know for a fact that when the Angels came in, it was a very rushed expansion. I know a lot of people in our SABR world know this as well. What happened was whoever the uniform supplier was, it was either Wilson or Rawlings, came in and said, what do you think of these? And red was in the mix, but it was not at the fore. That's probably as simple as it was.
Stan's from Toledo, and he says Toledo's known for the Mud Hens. Are there any minor league logos or nicknames you really enjoy, other than the one you did, of course?
Oh my goodness, there are so many of them. I also, I've done a bunch of minor league logos over the years, and some of them are really cool. There is, nothing more classic than the Durham Bulls, right? And it's because of Bull Durham, but it's a great look. And I don't even know where to start. Some of the silly names are really silly, but it's minor league baseball and it's all about fun. And the Toledo Mud Hens and the history of the Toledo Mud Hens visually and the name, such deep roots in the community. There are just so many stories. Very, very cool.
This question was submitted in advance. How far back did you study uniforms?
From the time I was probably 6 or 7 years old, literally. I would go to games, as I said earlier, and I would look at what was on the field. My doing the math, my 11-year-old mind was blown when the Houston Astros introduced their rainbow uniforms. And of course, back then, way before an internet, there was a game of the week. So sitting there and turning the game on, not only in anticipation of the game at hand, but to see what these teams were wearing, particularly early in the season when these kind of changes were not telegraphed in advance, was my jam.
MLB logos. Can you give us an example of Glazer's yes, no, wow?
Wow. Yeah, Milton Glaser actually critiqued major league logos. I would urge you to look this up so I don't get this wrong. I believe he was drawn to the Mets logo, but I think he liked the Mets, being a New Yorker, so no surprise there. He did not like, there was the wow for him was in traditional stuff. The man was born in the early 1930s, so no surprise there, or late 1920s. But he was not a fan of some of the more out there expansion teams. I'm going to try to find this article. I believe it was in Newsday. For those with a newspapers.com account, you can find it. Just Google in there Milton Glaser Major League logos. You're going to find it.
What is the design element in jerseys like the Athletics called, and why do so many teams use it?
I am struggling a little bit to think about what element this is. You know,
Jude, what element are you referring to, friend? Let's see. I'll see if they drop it in there. We'll come back to it. The next question is, any idea why baseball teams historically and even today have made so little use of real, that is bright or Kelly green? Could that have been?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, some colors don't reproduce well across all platforms. In other words, they don't, an embroidery color might look very different on television. A great example of this, actually, and it's a little bit different now, would be the Philadelphia Phillies' old maroon color, right? That color faded tremendously over the course of a season when teams probably issued 2 sets of uniforms. So the caps would look totally different than the twill on the uniforms than what was printed in a program. So some colors are bulletproof and other colors are a little janky when you roll it out across all these different platforms.
Thanks, Jude, for clarifying. So we'll go back to Jude's question. What is the design element in jerseys like the Athletics called, and why do so many teams use it? It's the long line coming from the last letter and going back towards the front.
The tail sweep, I don't know if that's the official word for it, but that's what I call it. I think it all comes back to the Dodgers with their elegant script lettering that they have worn across their chests since 1938. I always say, like, you close your eyes and you think of the absolute perfect baseball uniform, I'm going to go with the Dodgers. So I think that the endurance of that Dodgers script, is sort of prototypical baseball. You combine that with the players that have worn that uniform, with the success of that franchise, and I think success begets success. Look good, feel good. People want to just roll right with it, and I think that's what it is.
I've never even considered that element of any of the designs. Like, great eye, Jude. I look at jerseys all the time and never even think about stuff like that. I'm usually like,
if I could add to that, some teams it doesn't work as good for. One of the reasons that it works well, I think, in the case of the Dodgers, and less so in the case of the Athletics, is because the Dodgers have that descending G that tail sweep intersects with, and I'm just kind of like chef kiss, harmonizing. It makes beautiful harmony.
How would you feel about a resurgence of powder blue away unis?
Bring it on. It works for some teams and not for others. Just as was the case in the 70s. The Yankees aren't going to look good in powder blue. I don't care what anybody else says. But the Royals, the Blue Jays, those younger teams all look great in powder blue. The Tampa Bay Rays look great in powder blue. It's part of their color palette, admittedly, but why not? I think one of the joyous expressions of our uniforms in the 70s was the fact that molds were broken and gray is so drab And, supposedly Connie Mack was really cheap about cleaning uniforms and, needed gray because the dirt really hung on to those old flannels. So bring on the powder blue, bring on bright yellow, bring on bright green, blow it out.
See, I love, see, we just need you to do them all, just start them all from scratch. Is there any change you would make to the Red Sox unis besides getting rid of the minion look?
Uh, Again, I'm going to bring it back to the 70s just because. But I did love that period of time, when the Red Sox wore red headwear with a navy blue brim. They are the Red Sox. The Red Sox were very navy, always, looked like the Yankees on the road for quite some time. Red Sox shouldn't look like the Yankees. Yankees shouldn't look like the Red Sox. So I think in the case of the Red Sox, you would want to nibble around the edges very artfully, and be careful because you don't want to break what they've had for all those years. But there are ways to kind of paint around the edges and perhaps advance the look without disrespecting all of that heritage.
You mentioned the Astros rainbow jerseys. College teams have copied that, but it never looks as good. Is that the Astros had just the right color combination?
Often imitated, never duplicated, nothing like the OG. It is the colors, it is the balance of stripes. It was so startlingly original that anything that is trying to look like it is going to look like it. It's going to look derivative. There's no way around it. We've seen college teams roll out there with shades of blue. It's got to be tequila sunrises. And there's nothing like it.
Yeah, that jersey's fire. If I were to get an Astros jersey, I'd definitely get that one. What's your take on the monocolor uniforms? Think Philly maroon.
Works in some cases, not in others. I think that the simplicity and almost austerity of the Yankees or the Tigers or the Phillies in those uniforms, it's pretty great. It's pretty great. And then there are instances like these subtle things, like the Phillies' current uniforms with the two blue stars that punctuate the eyes, the only hit of blue on those uniforms, at home at least. So, color is interesting. Too much can be too much. Too little can be boring. I think it depends on the density of elements. I'm really going to geek out on you here. But sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
How about the cards, birds on the bat?
Oh, where do I even start? 100 years old this year. They rolled those out in 1922. They have evolved over the years. The tails have gone under. The bat has been black. It's been gold, but an absolute timeless classic that fits that city and that franchise just to an absolute T. I've done a lot of work with the Cardinals over the years. Just love that look. And I think one of the underrated elements of that uniform is all about the numbers, big oversized numbers that balance out those birds on bat. Cardinals have dropped the numbers on a couple of occasions over the years. You look at pictures of Mark McGwire in 1998, there are no numbers. For people who have never thought about that, take a look at it with and without and come back to me.
I have a question that's not in the chat. This is my own question. Like, do you have a favorite era? Like, is there like an era of jerseys and logos that you're like, yeah, this was pretty significant, most of it is fire?
It's a good question, and I would liken it personally to kind of food, right? You don't want to eat the same meal every night. I love the great uniforms that I just referenced: Dodgers, Cardinals, Yankees, Red Sox, Giants, blah 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 blah, because baseball is so rooted in antiquity, in good ways and bad. But I look then at the uniforms of the 60s and 70s that I've talked so much about, and I absolutely love them for different reasons. And then I look at what happened in the 90s, having been right there at that time. And it's interesting. The Rays will roll out those original Devil Rays uniforms from 1998 with the gradients and the upward sloping type. And you know what? I kind of love them. I wasn't all in on them at the time, but I think the answer is, like I said, you don't want to eat the same meal every night. You can cobble together from all of these and really enjoy it. And we've settled into a very conservative look in baseball since 1987. I wrote a blog post about this a number of years ago that talked about how baseball started to look backwards right at that time, maybe right at the time America was looking backwards for nostalgia at the same time. It's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. You kind of touched on this person's question, actually. I've seen a lot of people pining for the return of the 90s purple and green Rays look. Do you think that's a good idea, or is it better off left in the past?
Wow, terrible teams back then. Clearly, looks, as I said, in the case of the Dodgers, are elevated by winning usually, but I also know that nostalgia runs in 20 or 30-year waves, right? People who are your age, you're going to be drawn to something that you grew up with in the same way that I'm drawn to what I've been talking about all night with the uniforms of my youth. So I think it is, the Rays look is an acquired taste. It's a little garish. It is, somewhat befitting of a team born in 1998. No question about it. But I will say this, a little inside baseball, if you'll pardon the pun. MLB team owners are billionaires who are generally conservative people and dress conservatively, and they want their ball clubs to be conservative. And I don't know that would be the case in Tampa with Stu Sternberg, but at any rate, maybe it's best that the Rays bring that back occasionally and not permanently.
Vanderbilt has a baseball uniform that is black with gold pinstripes. I don't like the look. That's not me. That's Chris who doesn't like the look. What do you think of reversing the pinstripes?
It's a tough look. I mean, it does not look great. Night games on television. Think about that. What looks great in person during the day, for instance, might not look great in a situation like that. I'm not big on them. Though there is a history with this. Jacob would certainly know about the White Sox wearing white pinstripes on navy blue jerseys as far back as the 19-teens. Did it again in the 20s. Not a huge fan of it. And I can't articulate why otherwise.
I think the Vanderbilt uniforms, I always think it's because I wear glasses, but it always looks like the pinstripes are squiggling. Like they look busy for me. I also think they make everyone's butt look big, but that is just a personal thing with pinstripes.
It's kind of true, there is, by the way, there is this fallacy, this urban legend, this apocryphal thing that, well, the Yankees wear pinstripes because, they wanted Babe Ruth to look thinner. And as everybody here, because we're all SABR people and we know better, no, the Yankees wore pinstripes when Babe Ruth was still wearing knickers, running around St. Mary's in Baltimore.
Does anyone have any more questions before we wrap this up? We're coming close to an hour here. This was fun.
We could do another hour, let's go. Where's Ernie Banks? You're in Chicago.
Would you agree that teams feel more free to experiment with road unis than home?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I think it depends on the club and the fan base. Everything is clearly out the window with Nike's involvement and all of these city connects. There are franchises that are never going to be, and I'm not going to name names here, but I know when I do work for certain teams, I'm like, I don't want to get too daring because it's never going to fly. And then there are some that are that think that they know that they want to do something different and really don't. And then there are some that just want to blow things out. So I do think that it depends on the club.
The Brooklyn Dodgers once had a checkerboard uniform. Any chance for that pattern to return?
0. The Giants and the Dodgers in 1916 experimented with these window pane or checkered board looks. You talking about the Vandy uniforms vibrating on TV. I can't imagine what something like that would look like if you had a little bit of lag on your device and you were watching on your on MLB.tv. But you never know. It would be a cool throwback.
How did you go about redesigning Milwaukee's brand from ball and mitt to the interlocking MB logo with 90s teal and blue, i.e., how did you decide on the style and colors?
Yeah, well, so very controversial now, but not so much at the time. The ball and glove was not necessarily beloved in 1992, 93, which is when this was being worked on. The club was not good. Winning again cures a multitude of ills. Fact of the matter is that the Brewers kind of hit their peak in 1982 when they went to the World Series. They had those great Harvey Wallbangers clubs, and 77, 78 with George Bamberger. By the early 90s, Robin Yount is about ready to hang it up. The ball and glove was seen as, I remember people calling it a paw print, not very beloved. Additionally, the Brewers were looking to build what became Miller Park. So they looked to embark upon a new era. Green was a hot color in sports at that particular time. Metallic threads were tremendously hot at that time. So the Brewers wanted to deepen the blue to navy. A lot of clubs were doing that. At that moment, green was about the woods of Wisconsin. Gold was just a different expression of what was then yellow. And the look of it was kind of rooted in baseball tradition, but with multiple outlines. We were all doing it then, a lot of complexity. And ultimately, it was a very fleeting transitional look for the club as they moved to the new ballpark. Not beloved by a lot of people now, but real quick, that was the last job that I actually did by hand, sketched out the lettering for Brewers for the uniforms, sketched out the word Milwaukee, and I lent that original lettering to the Worcester, Massachusetts Art Museum last year for an exhibit that they had. So it has been in a museum, even if the clubs weren't good, and even if, the ball and glove was rightfully brought back.
So tonight is game one of the NBA Finals. I recognize this is a baseball chat, people, but what are your thoughts on the jersey matchup with the Celtics and the Warriors? I really think the Celtics jersey is kind of classic, but I'm interested in your thoughts on the Celtics and Warriors jerseys.
Yeah, the Warriors have had many looks over the years. They had that great look that said "The City" with the bridge back in the 60s. I have a blog piece that I actually, for those of you who are on Twitter, I tweeted it out today, something I wrote several years ago about the origins of that look. So they stepped it up and they kind of, recreated it. But the Warriors have kind of, talk about chipping away at their identity. They've kind of fussed it up. I want to see them out there in yellow tonight with the Celtics in green. One of the things I really dislike about following the NBA on social media is that I'll see a clip and I have no idea who's playing because there are no home or road designations. But to your point, the Celtics are such a classic look. They now have Boston on their road uniforms, Celtics in white at home. They got a black jersey in the mix. That's okay. It looks good. I think it's a good looking matchup. And it's so interesting because, as so many of us, I'm sure, tuned into 75th anniversary of the NBA, what they call their 75th anniversary. And you've got two of the existent three 1946 clubs facing off against each other. I'm looking forward to it.
Nice.
Celtics in
I
7.
didn't even consider that. Oh, we got a prediction there. I gotta tell you, although I'm sure my friends are gonna be so mad at me, I'm quietly rooting for the Celtics.
I won't say anything.
Just between us friends, y'all, I'm quietly rooting for the Celtics. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was so fun. I feel like we could have talked for a whole nother hour. Thank you again. Thank you to everyone for joining. I hope you will join us next month. I will be tweeting out next month's guest in about 5 minutes. I could tell you right now, but I decided to put it on Twitter. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.